Welcome back to part 2 of our Copa Libertadores knockout stage preview. And Nathalia Tavares from Series 2 rejoins us to, talk about Flamengo and a few other Brazilian teams in the second half of the draw. Nat, how are we doing?
Doing fine. Super happy to be back and to finally record with Peter. Hadn't met him before, so yeah, super glad to be back.
Peter's always here. I can't get rid of him. It's just at this point, he's part of the furniture now.
People want a Bulgarian talking about Brazilian football.
They do. I can't argue it. Yeah, you said it. But let's kick off the right-hand side of the draw, which I think is a lot more tastier, to be honest with you. I think we struggled to predict the first side of the draw, to be honest with you. I think this one's equally as difficult. And that first fixture is Uruguay's Nacional versus Sao Paulo. And look, I've tipped my hat to Cal for a couple of players from the first podcast, but he was saying that Sao Paulo could be his dark horse. And I'm slowly buying into it. I think they're unfortunate with this side of the draw, but under Luis Abeldia, I think that should have been the appointment in the first place. Bringing in Thiago Carpini was a complete disaster, but they've brought in a manager here who Ecuadorian champion, won the Sudamericana. He's been there, he's done that. They're looking really strong, and we'll get into a few more players. But Nat, I'm going to jump to you first because I'm sure you've seen plenty of Sao Paulo this season. I know they beat Flamengo, so it's probably bad timing for you to come onto the podcast. But they were incredibly impressive in that game. High energy, high press, and I can see them causing some upsets. Maybe not this game as an upset, but if they get through this game, they could do pretty well in this competition, couldn't they?
Yeah, they are on a rise. Obviously, they didn't start really well, even under Zubeldia. Yeah, but they are on the rise now. And the thing is, if they win this tie, they are probably getting Botafogo or Palmeiras. And if it's Palmeiras, there's recent history in the Libertadores against the two teams. So it's going to be very interesting to see if Sao Paulo can manage to stay in this path. And yeah, I agree. It can be a dark horse in the end. Who knows?
I think the play we have to talk about is Lucas Moura, and I don't know what he's doing in Brazil. I honestly think he should have spent another year or two in Europe. He has been the most important player for Sao Paulo, and all the play is still going through him in Zubeldia's preferred 4-3-3 system. There's so much experience there, and you may see he's finishing his days, where he's going to go back to his club. He won the cup last season, and maybe that's it. But he's determined more than ever on the pitch, and everything's going through him. He's keeping them ticking over. Peter, surely you always seem to disagree with me at the moment, but surely you're impressed with Lucas Moura as well.
Oh, wow. Okay, we're going to throw that out. No, I actually agree with you, absolutely. I think a lot of people that watch Brazil on a regular were surprised at the time when last year there was a double swoop, first Lucas Moura and then James Rodriguez joined as well, and everybody was very excited, mostly about James actually, because it's James Rodriguez at the end of the day, but it was actually Lucas Moura that absolutely shredded everybody for Sao Paulo. I'm surprised he's hit the ground running the way he did, just because he didn't play towards the end for Tottenham, and then now we're looking probably one of the best players. I'd go as far as to argue right now, I'd say he's top 3 in Brazil. He's just that good, if I'm honest. The impact he's had on that side, and yes, you did mention the manager, but in terms of players just outright, and we also laughed about this prior to the pod, the golden oldies that they have, he feels like the proper, just the leader of that squad right now. I'm not even shocked that this is happening, because you mentioned the perfect. He's not a player that should have moved so early to Brazil. I guess he just got homesick or whatnot, but
yeah,
fantastic for Sao Paulo. Fantastic, absolutely incredible.
You've touched on the golden oldies there. Luis Gustavo in the middle of the park. I mean, he's doing a very good job in Pablo Maia's absence, and I wanted to touch on Pablo Maia because he was linked with European moves, started to edge into the Brazilian team. He probably would have played some part in Copa America. He may have started ahead of João Gomez. We'll never know, obviously. But they still have him to come back, and he may be fit for the latter stages of the tournament if they get there. So that's really impressive. But yeah, Luis Gustavo has come in the middle of the park and done a really good job. Rafinha, who's 38 at right back. Like, there's experience there, but for some reason, it's all working and coming together. And I know we've not really touched on Nacional here because, unfortunately, like I don't think they are the team to progress here, especially when you look at the group they came through. Yes, they had River Plate who won first, but Libertad and Takira from Venezuela, like they've progressed in an easy group, but they've bumped into a real progressive side here who have been performing incredibly well in Brazil across all fronts, really. And like even the game, now I'm sorry to bring it up again, but that 1-0 win against Flamengo, even if you just look at the highlights, it was just wave after wave attack from Sao Paulo, but everything was going through Lucas Moura. So, look, Nacional, I mean, they have something about them. They drew 2-2 with River Plate during the group stage. Yes, River, as we discussed in part one, weren't completely at it. But I think, do you know what? I think Carol Goodall's completely onto something here. I think Sao Paulo could be the dark horses at this stage of the competition. Anything else either of you want to add about Sao Paulo, or is it just the Lucas Moura show?
Yeah.
On my end,
No.
I'd say, yeah, go on, go on.
No, I was just gonna say he identifies with the club, and that counts a lot. He made sure everyone knew that. Guess his wife, when he returned, she was like, "Yeah, I'm so happy to be here." That was part of her helping him make the decision to come back. So she's to blame at some point for his maybe anticipated return to Brazil. But I feel like he made the right decision. He's won the first Copa do Brasil with Sao Paulo last season, and now they can get burning in the Libertadores. And this side of the tournament we're going to talk about, these 4 games that are happening, these 4 ties, it's interesting for Sao Paulo. They've beaten most of these teams. They are superior to most of these teams, to some of these teams, not most, but anyways, they have a shot, and it's not like a fine margins. They have a proper shot. I honestly believe they do.
And I think that's what's exciting, because we said in the first one, we felt like if there was going to be a non-Brazilian team to win it, it's set up for River with Gallardo coming back. But it would also be quite refreshing for someone like Sao Paulo to break the mold of the usual Brazilian teams. And look, they have a tough run, but in the Libertadores, you have to beat the best to get to the final, right? So really intriguing. I'm definitely excited to see how they progress, but I think we're all on the same page that they get by against Nacional. But it's the next game and the next opponents who could be really tough. Let's focus on the next one, Botafogo versus Palmeiras. And I think, look, without sounding negative, outside in, if you don't watch South American football too much or Brazilian football, I think a lot of people will get excited about this particular match. But from my point of view, Abel Ferreira knows how to win these games. He knows how to get through in 2 legs. If you look at them beating Mineiro over the last 3 tournaments, it's always been by a single goal. It's never entertaining at this stage of the tournament for Palmeiras. So it's experience with their side. However, Botafogo are such an exciting team to watch. The amount of money that John Textor is throwing at this team, he is so desperate to win a title, no matter what it is. It's not going to be Copa do Brasil after getting knocked out within that. But Nat, I'm going to come to you first, because you did a wonderful piece in the latest magazine around Thiago Almada, who is probably going to be the star on the show, because Estevao, well, I'll let Peter talk about Estevao. He may be playing, he may not, he may be rushed back. Peter can have his therapy venting moment in a minute. But Nat, I'll let you talk about Thiago Almada, because what a sensational pickup for Botafogo, and he could be key in this game.
Yeah, I have high hopes for him. I was excited to see him debuting against Bahia. I know the result wasn't the best, but he wasn't on the pitch when Bahia scored, so there's that. Yeah, he can't be blamed. But I feel like those 45 first minutes that he played were okay. He did his usual job. He's super intelligent, super. It's hard to explain. He just knows what to do. He knows where to be, and he's pretty precise on his decisions. He doesn't tend to go, "Oh no, that's not what I'm supposed to do." But I'm excited to see how he's gonna do in Brazil. I feel like many people might think this was the wrong move, but I don't think it was. And there's also some chat about Botafogo being a satellite club for Crystal Palace and Lyon, but I don't think it's going to be like that. I don't share this idea, to be fair. I feel if Botafogo starts winning the way John Textor expects them to win, things might change for them, and those players ain't gonna come to Botafogo thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna move to Europe." They're gonna think about staying here, building a platform, and maybe moving to Europe. There's a lot of talk. I don't know if it gets to you, but here there's talk about the Brazilian league becoming the Turkish league. With some big names, some young names, some younger names, and some older names, but big names coming to Brazil. And I feel like this is a cool move. And John Textor has been really key to that. I feel like he's picking up the right younger talents in Europe and bringing to Botafogo and trying to build this platform for the club because it's going to get a competitive team. The team's going to get more competitive, but they need to win. I feel like this is key. They getting knocked out of the Copa do Brazil might be some fuel for them to do better in the Libertadores, especially because there is some tension building between Palmeiras and Botafogo in recent ties, obviously because of last year. So yeah, I'm really excited. When the draw happened, I was like, okay, this is the game of this stage, and yeah, I'm really excited to see just because Thiago Almada is gonna get back to the Libertadores. He played when he was in Vélez 3 years ago. I remember he plays against Flamengo. Never gonna forget that. But yeah, so I'm excited to see how he's gonna do. I feel like if Botafogo really want to push for some titles this season, they have two possible titles to win, and I feel like they're gonna be strong in both fronts. I feel like this is gonna do with how Almada adapts to the team and how he can help.
It's definitely going to be down to players like Thiago Almada. Where I probably started this fixture being quite negative is I feel like the midfields are going to be so packed. I feel like there's not going to be too much room, especially because they both sort of line up with that 4-2-3-1 formation, especially Botafogo in terms of with Luis Enrique, who likes to go out wide, but if things are struggling, he comes in the middle. Is it just going to get a little bit crowded? But then it's going to come up to players like Thiago Almada to find those pockets of space and get in behind Palmeiras. And look, Botafogo have already beaten Palmeiras this season. And as you said, after that dramatic 4-3 game last season, there is this new rivalry. And you could say Botafogo need to win because going to Allianz Parque in that second leg is going to be incredibly difficult. Palmeiras rarely lose there, but Botafogo did beat them last season in the league. So it is set up. I think Abel Ferreira knows just to try and get out of there without any damage, hope for a 0-0. I don't think they're going to be too clever and go for the win. I think without Estevao, we've seen in recent weeks that they've struggled in the final third and they've not known exactly what to do. Nat, did you want to say something?
No, yeah, I was going to say that Abel Ferreira is very pragmatic. I went to the Flamengo Palmeiras tie for the Copa do Brazil. Palmeiras didn't play. It was horrible to see them. Horrible, horrible, horrible. I can see him doing the same, not playing, just trying to hold a 1-0, maybe 0-0. They can draw 0-0. It's going to be great for Palmeiras, and then they are going to go to Allianz Parque and smash Botafogo, try and smash Botafogo. But these are two. Arthur Jorge team is super great to see. I get excited watching Botafogo because it's so fluid. It's crazy. It's very crazy and super like, how did you manage to do this? Because it was a manager coming in the middle of the season, more or less. But he got his ideas to the players very fast and it's working. So, yeah. And with the names coming, I feel like it's only going to get better and better.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you look at Botafogo, we spoke about Botafogo against Junior in part one of this podcast in terms of they were all over the place. There was no plan there, and Asa Jorge's come in and done a superb job. Peter, you've been on the sidelines waiting for the opportunity for this particular match. Estevao, does he need to play for Palmeiras to win this game?
Absolutely, yes. I don't think that needs to be said right now. It's just, I know, obviously we couldn't have predicted him to be this good, but like he's Well, you mentioned it perfectly. I think he's arguably being one of the top performers, if not the top performer for the side coming in. And I'm just scared as a Chelsea fan as well that Abel Ferreira being Abel Ferreira, he's kind of recognized the talent there. Now he's just going to try and push consistently. Like this, all Brazilian sides are guilty of this. That they just feel like they can push the players in. No disrespect, now I'm sorry, but it is what it is. They just do it on a regular basis, and sometimes players get rushed into with injuries or just with minor niggles here and there. But those things are actually very dangerous. So I'm kind of hoping they just give him the necessary time to recover as much as possible. Yes, he's still 17, so his body recovers at a much faster rate than a grown-up. But at the same time, this is football. One injury could kill his whole career. But just to touch a little bit on Botafogo as well, I think one of the things that I really like about John Textor, I do admit, yes, the spending kind of is out of its way a little bit, but Flamengo have been doing it for years, for example, and that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to spend in Brazil, because at the end of the day in Brazil you're not going to turn suddenly Brazil into Saudi Arabia. But it's just a smart deals that they've made, because for example, they kind of looked at Gremio at the start of the season, I believe it was, or like mid-season, let's say, and they needed a left back, and they went and bought Cuiabano, who was not a household name to anybody, but they looked at him and said, okay, look, we got to address our left back issues. That's a fine option to have. And he was already making waves in Gremio, not European top tier level waves, but enough to just guarantee a move. And then they've looked at the midfield issues. They went out, signed Thiago Almada, and they signed Alan, who nobody actually speaks of, but he's actually a top tier signing for Brazil. I'm almost shocked nobody actually gives him his props. And then then they come to Watford and sign Mateus Martins, who's probably not played out the way they wanted to, but he's also a great talent. So it's kind of experience and then young talent and then this and that. It's very admirable. I think, if anything, I don't think the kind of the epitome around Botafogo is that they're actually big, humongous spenders that just kind of target everything and think they can buy their way into glory. They've actually spent relatively smart. Yes, they're spending a lot, but it's relatively smart. And with regards to Palmeiras, you're both very correct. I feel Abel Ferreira is just going to make this game absolutely horrendous to watch, especially the way for Palmeiras. He's going to be the most obnoxious big team ever. If I'm honest, I'm not looking forward to watching that in a sense. Obviously, I will, but you've covered it well that he's going to try to minimize every single risk that the side could take and just avoid anything getting out of hand, because I do think on paper, for me, Botafogo are the better side, and if they gel even further going down the road towards that game, they're probably going to be even better. So I do think Botafogo probably do end up edging Palmeiras out, but it's one where I wouldn't be surprised that if Palmeiras actually do manage to scrape a 0-0 draw away and then go back to Allianz Park, you're very correct. Anything can happen there, and regardless of how good Botafogo have been, I wouldn't put it past Abel Ferreira to just sneak another result and just go forward. He's a master of that every single year.
He is, and we've touched on the youth players there, but they are lacking in the final third at the moment. Obviously, Guilherme's gone to West Ham. Yes, he hadn't played too much. Hendrick, obviously now at Real Madrid, and Estevao potentially injured and out of it. So that's three potential starting players. I know Guilherme was coming off the bench a lot. But that's three key players across that front line. And without them, I think Botafogo, they need to win this first leg. It needs to be, if they get a 2-goal advantage, I think the tie's done and dusted, but they need a win. It will be really interesting. I said Botafogo from the very beginning when we first recorded around the Libertadores. I thought that they were huge outsiders on the betting market, which I couldn't believe. So I'm going to stick with Botafogo to sneak through. Nat, who's your prediction for this? Palmeiras or Botafogo to sneak through?
I'm going to go with Botafogo, just because I feel like they're winning the tie at home, and I feel like it's gonna happen the same thing. Palmeiras ain't gonna play in the first game. I feel like Botafogo is winning, and then roles are reversing. Botafogo is gonna be more quiet, wait for the Palmeiras to play, see what happens, try to park the bus. Not park the bus literally, because they have smart, fast players. They can counterattack. They do it often. Steal the ball, counterattack, goal. And I can see that happening in both legs. So yeah, I feel like Botafogo has a great shot of winning at Newton Santos, and if that happens, I feel like Botafogo is going to advance. Maybe if it draws, that's a little bit harder to say. I can see it going to the penalties as well. It would be fun to see this penalty shootout.
Could be similar to Palmeiras.
But I'm going with
Boca
Botafogo
last season.
advancing.
There you go.
And
All three of us gone Botafogo, so Palmeiras will probably win that tie 3-0 now. We've said that.
Yeah, Felipe Anderson comeback hat trick.
yeah.
We didn't mention him. I just remember it.
There's almost, if we went through every
Too
single
much,
player, this
Yeah.
podcast would last forever. But I will mention Palmeiras' 18-year-old centre-back, Vitor Reis, who's just come onto the scene, scored the winner but still lost against Flamengo in Copa do Brazil, scored on his debut against Corinthians. He looks a real player to keep an eye on, and I'm sure we'll talk about him on the podcast at a later date, so we'll save that, but we'll drop it in now just to mention that we brought him up early, nice and early before he's linked to Europe.
Yeah.
The next tie, I actually think this is the tie. If you want to get into South American football and find out what South American football is all about, or the Copa Libertadores, I mean, diehards of the Copa Club will know that I'm a huge advocate for Bolivian teams. But Penarol
Yeah, that's
versus
because
the
your
strongest-
team doesn't play in Bolivia. That's why. I feel like every team in the world should be playing in Bolivia once in their lifetime, once in their existence.
100%. It would be horrible. But Penarol versus the strongest is going to be an entertaining game. Okay, so look, we're not going to claim to be huge experts of either of these teams, but I think it's important to touch upon them because they will be playing potentially Flamengo or another Bolivian team in the next round. But first of all, hats off to both the strongest and Bolivar, because both Bolivian teams finished top of their group. I think must be the first time ever in Libertadores history that two Bolivian teams have done that. They've only ever needed to win their home games and rely on a point on the road, but both teams were able to do that. So the strongest have, by finishing top, avoided a quote-unquote big team. However, they have been drawn Penarol, and Penarol have, they finished in second place behind Mineiro. They did beat Mineiro and knocked Rosario out as well, which was completely unexpected. They've not progressed out of the group stage in a number of years. And one of their main players, the two players I want to touch upon here, Leonardo Fernandez, who is on loan from Toluca, who was on loan at Fluminense last season, who not many people know about. So he's already got a Libertadores winners medal, but he couldn't find a way into Denise's team. But how Denise would have loved him at the start of this season, because he has been unbelievable. He is way too good for Uruguayan football. He scored 2 goals, 3 assists in the 6 games across the group stage. Everything went through him. He scored an outrageous free kick at the weekend against Nacional in the playoff final. Go and check that out. He'll be on Twitter somewhere for sure. But he's what makes them tick. He pulls the strings in around Penarol and pulls defences apart, and they will definitely pull the strongest apart in that first leg. But what's interesting, and the reason why I said about the two Bolivian teams finishing top of the group, because that never happens. If a Bolivian team squeezes through, they have to build up the advantage at home first and then hope for the best in the second leg. Now with these two games, especially with this Penarol, the strongest, it's the other way around, where they're going to potentially be chasing a 2 or 3 goal deficit. And I think that's going to be, if that happens, I think that is the one game worth staying up for in that second leg. So yes, you're not going to watch beautiful Brazilian football or Argentinian football. You're not going to see Franco Mastantuono doing his thing, but you will see South American football in all its glory. Yeah. However, the one negative, because I'm bringing a lot of negativity to this podcast throughout every game it appears, if you go through the strongest team, every player in the group stage throughout the midfield and the defence, I'm not going to pick on too many names because there's too many to go through, were all above 30 years old. I think they had 1 or 2 under the age of 27. So against Penarol, with players like Fernandez finding pockets of space, they will get picked apart. However, when that game goes to La Paz, the strongest have Michael Ortega, who played for Leverkusen earlier on in his career, and he's been a wonderful player operating in the same space for them. So this tie could go either way. I always feel like Penarol will build up a lead when a Bolivian team's away from home and then hope for the strongest to come back in La Paz. So if anyone is thinking about staying up, honestly, this is the game where you're not going to find the next best player for a European club, but this is South American football at its finest. So I will leave it there for that particular game because let's just watch it unfold. I'm not sure which way that is going to go, but do keep an eye on Leonardo Fernandez. And there's another player for Penarol who I just want to drop in there, in Damian Garcia. Peter and I spoke about him previously on the podcast because he was linked with a move to Rangers. And number 6, a DM, if you're old school and you don't want to go with numbers, but his array of passing is beautiful to watch. And he's another player who he's just extended his contract. I'm not 100% sure because it looked like he was going to get an opportunity in Europe. But let's see where he is in 12 months' time, and we can come back to this podcast and say, you've spoken about him, you were warned. That's a really exciting 21-year-old who looks like he fits the right profile for European football. He's strong, has a good pass on him. He's not going to get you goals, but he's almost the assist before the assist, so to speak. So another player who definitely want to watch, but don't judge him on his performance in La Paz because, as we all know, the altitude there is
it's another
horrendous.
sport. We say it's another sport. It's totally different. The ball just moves differently on the pitch, on the air. It's unreal. But I agree, it's gonna be a fun tie to watch, both legs. And yeah, that's the one. It all depends on how Penarol does at home. If they are able to build a good advantage to their side, maybe they'll get through. Because
But that's what makes it interesting, the fact that they have to panic.
Usually
They're
Bolivian teams get the first tie at home. They just hope they don't concede any goals and hope for the best when they travel. But this time around, the two Bolivian teams are playing the second leg at home, and it's usually that time of the year, especially in Brazil, Argentina, even Uruguay. Calendar tends to become a little bit hotter for teams because everybody's getting tired. There's a lot of cup games, league games, so that will be interesting to watch the whole leg, especially because I know it's hard, but we could have a Bolivia tie on the strongest and Bolivar.
Don't,
and that would be super crazy. I swear, it's possible. It's possible.
Peter at this stage would leave the podcast because I don't think he could handle me talking about two Bolivian teams in a quarterfinal of the Libertadores. That would be amazing. But look, let's move across to the next tie because I think it's too hard to predict a winner. I probably will go towards Penarol, but the next tie, and that obviously you're dedicated Flamengo fan, so obviously you're probably very keen to talk about this final game before we do our last predictions. But Flamengo versus Bolivar, so I won't dive too much into Bolivar. This is a repeat, right? Because in the group stage,
this is a repeat. Yeah.
Bolivar beat Flamengo 2-1, but then back at the Maracanã 4-0 to Flamengo, and I see it playing out very similar, to be honest with you. So probably Flamengo will get through. I think the main thing to point out here, I'm going to say one more thing about a Bolivian thing before I pass over to you guys, before people switch off from the podcast. But Francisco da Costa, who is almost Bolivar's Berbatov, if you've watched him, right? He has a man bun. He scored in all 3 group games at home in the group stage, pretty much effectively won the games for Bolivar and got them to this stage. He's transferred to Cerro Porteño, and they're really lacking the target man at the moment. And part of playing in La Paz, which is so difficult, is having a striker who you can keep pumping balls up to, and defenders tire in the heat and the altitude. So that's a massive advantage to Flamengo. I think over 2 legs, Flamengo won't have a problem. But now I want to talk to you about Flamengo because they started that group stage really poor. I know you took a trip to go and watch them lose to Palestino. Apologies to bring that up.
What a crazy thing I did. Craziest thing I've ever done.
But they bounce back. Real. They bounce back.
Yeah,
and that's what we see. We see it every year with Flamengo. Whoever's in charge, whoever's being played, Flamengo start the season really slow and then grow into it. And then now they look strong across domestic leagues. But the Libertadores, I mean, we've spoke about this side of the draw and how tough it is. But in theory, Flamengo get past Bolivar. But how far can they go in this tournament? Because this side of the draw is really tough.
Yeah, they could be facing another trip to Bolivia if they struggle. I can't. I can't. It's always Flamengo in the group stage. Like two teams were in the altitudes, and now maybe the strongest as well. But yeah, Flamengo has the team to beat anyone. Titi's been doing an okay job. He's kind of he doesn't want to abandon some of his ideas. He's insisting some things that aren't working. But yeah, okay, we'll see. But Flamengo has a team that can beat any team. Honestly, it's one of the best, if not the best team in South America. It's all about consistency. I remember I wrote about Flamengo in January and I said they needed consistency. It's a bit lacking. It could be better at this stage of the season, especially because Copa do Brasil and Libertadores, if you are not consistent, you're out. So, yeah, I feel like Flamengo is advancing in the Libertadores, but that depends on this first leg. It depends on how Flamengo is getting there because in the group stage, Flamengo played in Bolivia first and then in Rio. So they needed to beat Bolivia to get through. They did it, cool. But now it's the other way around, and the calendar is very, very, very hard to keep up with. I feel like it's Palmeiras and then Bolivar, then Botafogo, and then Bolivar again. So, 4 huge games for Flamengo.
That's rough. That's rough.
That's rough. So
and I forgot to say, sorry.
No, yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I forgot to say actually, because I think that's really important and something we've completely missed until now. But Sao Paulo, who are playing Nacional, Nacional got an 11-day break, where Brazil have got Sao Paulo have 2 games before Nacional. And so it's really important to say that. So yes, Flamengo should get past Bolivar, but the amount of games and opponents who they've got, there's going to be tired legs going to La Paz. I'm not trying to build excitement here saying that Bolivar are going to do Flamengo over 2 legs. That's not going to happen. But I'm finding with Flamengo, he's very stubborn in terms of this is my 11 and that's it. We haven't seen any of the youngsters integrated into the side. I think that's been a huge change, apart from Lorran, who we'll get into in a minute. But apart from him, there's no matter how many games there are, I seem to see the same 11 all the time, and it's only because Pedro's been banging them in, week out, that Flamengo seem to be doing quite well at the moment. As soon as Pedro gets injured or has a goal drought, they may be in trouble. Peter, I'll come to you because I'm sure you've got plenty to say about Flamengo. I know last season they were a complete circus, and that seems to have been fixed to an extent this time round. But coming up against either in this hectic schedule, which we are addressing now, and then potentially Botafogo, Palmeiras in the next round and then maybe even Sao Paulo, who they recently just lost to, and Flamengo are heavy favourites to win the Libertadores according to the bookmakers. But would you put your money on them?
I think when we spoke about it prior to the tournament, I said that, and I think Nas has already said it, that Flamengo can easily beat anyone in this tournament. Easily. This is just the way they're set up. They do have one of the best squads, if not the best in South America, just because of all the depth, the pieces there, every top tier player for a position is just facts. But that's on the surface of it. I feel, as you mentioned, and that's very correct, consistency has always been a problem for them. And they kick off slow, and yes, they have managerial issues. I for one don't actually really like Chiche. I just don't. I feel like he let down. I wouldn't call it a golden chance with Brazil now, but he definitely had a good squad with Brazil capable of taking a much more offensive and then entertaining approach, and probably reaping much bigger. Yeah, absolutely, and you mentioned it. The fact that he doesn't change a lot unless proven to be wrong, really proven to be wrong, is what goes to show here. And you also alluded to it. I will allude to it as well. You mentioned about one side lacking a top tier 9, and the other one, well, Flamengo have Pedro. But the thing is, Pedro has just scored 25 plus goals now this year. I think the next one is, it is ridiculous because that's 30 good, 40 plus games, 30 goals. So that's amazing. But on the other hand of it, when you think about it, you have I think is it De Arrascaeta? I think it's De Arrascaeta that has scored like the next amount of goals, which is a single
6.
digit number. Like
Yeah,
I'm pretty
6.
sure it's a single digit number.
It's 6.
Which from 29 to 6, like, imagine the difference of 23 goals. Meaning that if, hypothetically speaking, Pedro goes down for some reason, or is just absent, where do you actually score goals from? Obviously, someone will chip in, but in the big games, you trust your big players. And they've all kind of took a slight step back in their offensive production, and that's a very big hit because these are your top level players. These are the ones that get you over the line. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Lorran. Like we've talked about it, we know Lorran for a good 2 years now, and he's built for these types of games. Yes, both frame, just mind, everything. He has the ability to do it, but whilst I can make the argument that yes, in Brazil and in South America, you can trust a 70-year-old kid to just get you over the hump, I don't think that's the case when, yes, okay, you go past Bolivar and then you maybe pass the strongest. That happens and you get tired legs and so on and so on. But once you meet maybe a Botafogo or Palmeiras, you need your top players firing, and the lack of consistency plus Chicho's pragmatism is just too much for me to like at all. Like honestly, I'm sorry that, but I just don't like it at all. And it's not because I hate Flamengo. If anything, like now I'm sympathizing with Flamengo because they're always the big side you want more from, and it's a little bit a case of they just can be better. Like at this point, you want them to be better.
Yeah, and Pedro can't keep banging them in for the next few months. That drought will happen at some point.
Yeah, I feel like he can. But if something happens,
just that good.
We'll see.
A
then,
super
won't we?
big if. But yeah, it feels like if Pedro is not on the pitch, things won't work. Just against Sao Paulo, I don't know if it would be much different because Sao Paulo literally smashed Flamengo. I was scared watching the first 5 minutes. I didn't see Flamengo holding to the ball. I was like, what? But yeah, I was super like, okay. And we didn't have Pedro because he forced his third yellow card, so he had to take that game to
exactly.
a suspension.
So if a suspension comes in, then that's a huge problem
on
for
a
Flamengo.
key time. It was okay. It was a strategy, I think. Proved wrong, but I still feel like it would be better to lose him against Sao Paulo than against Palmeiras or Botafogo, which are usually more heated ties. So, and it obviously Sao Paulo is there hoping to challenge for the title as well, but at the moment it's Palmeiras, Flamengo, and Botafogo. So those are much more key matches at the moment. Anyways, we'll see. I feel like Pedro playing, there's a huge chance Flamengo will do much better, but I feel like the bench should be more, not better used, but still better used, but they should give more of a response. For example, Gabigol, he's coming on and just staying there. I know he wants out, the club's forcing him out. There's two sides to this story. Anyways, but he should be doing better.
Gabigol's an episode in itself. We can't get to Gabigol now.
He should be doing better.
Yeah, definitely.
He should be doing better no matter if he's staying or leaving. Anyways, he literally gave Flamengo to Libertadores. There's gratitude from the fans, from the club. I mean, the directors are being hard on him, but still, you know.
Maybe it's going to be his big farewell.
Yeah, maybe.
It could be his big farewell. It could be. Look, let's park it there. I just want two teams from you in just a couple of words. We spoke, Pete and I did a few recommendations from this side of the draw, but look, we've concluded it all now, so I think it's good to put across a couple of teams, maybe a team who we fancy and a dark horse. I've said Botafogo from the start as a dark horse, but I actually think they're slowly becoming my number one pick. If they get through against Palmeiras, that's going to be really interesting to see. I'm really tempted to say Sao Paulo, but I'm not. I'm going to stick with Botafogo. And in part one, I did say that Fluminense could easily get to the semi-finals. Like, they've turned things around. That side of the draw is easy. I don't think they'll get further than that, but I think that'll be a huge success for the champions considering what has happened in recent months. Nat, your team to win the Libertadores and potential outsider if you have one.
No, yeah. I hope my team wins. Not gonna lie. I hope Flamengo wins. Not only because, yeah, okay, because I support them, but I feel like Flamengo has the chance to win it. They have the team to beat all those other teams they're seeing the Libertadores. But the outsider, I'd say River, just because Gallardo is a whole entity. He just turned River around in his first stint, and I can see he getting the team back on track. And I just wanted to say very quickly about Grêmio and Fluminense because I feel like the team that advances there has a shot of getting further in the competition, maybe making it to the final. But it would be fun to watch what happens with the winner of this tie, either Grêmio or Fluminense. What happens to them on the in the league because it's not looking good. But yeah, I feel like those three teams and Botafogo as
I
well.
see.
I feel like if they beat Palmeiras, they are gonna come super strong
You've just said
for the
four
rest of the
teams.
competition.
You're
Yeah,
covering all of it.
yeah. But
See, I
yeah,
think that
those four
shows like
teams.
that it's quite difficult to predict, especially out the Brazilian teams. Peter,
Yeah.
one or two words from you, please. Your main pick and your outside pick, and we'll call it a day from there.
My main pick probably actually now agrees with you. Anybody who advances from Botafogo or Palmeiras is my bet, just because of if Palmeiras advances the experience, if Botafogo advances just the firepower that they have on all cylinders. And then my outsider pick is actually not Steam Flamengo, just because they're pretty much, if they advance these two legs, they're, unless they lose to Penarol, which would be a surprise to me, they're pretty much locked in the semi-final, and it's all about getting through there. And then I feel on the other side of the draw, they're more likely to face a much weaker opponent from the one they just faced in the semi-final. So, if anything, yes, obviously it's a final. I know that's in hindsight, but I feel that once, if they manage to get to the final, they're heavy favorites to win that, just off the ability that they have and sheer like experience alone.
I like how your outside pick is the massive favourites. But we'll leave it there. Look, if you have enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe across Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. If you haven't picked up a copy of issue 5, please also do that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to be generous because it's the podcast. So if you have stuck with us throughout part 1 or part 2, if you put in Copper 5, you will get the magazine for £5 across the next week. So a little reward if you have stuck with us throughout part 1 and part 2. But look, Peter, Nat, thank you very much for your time. I'm looking forward to see how this unfolds over the next few weeks.